Okay, so now that we have a first idea of how the theming system generally works and how we might want to adjust the theme, the question of course is, how should we now adjust the theme and which parameters should you set here? Well, in general, as always, it is a good idea to simply play around with different parameters here, but there is at least one thing you should know before you start playing around with that. When it comes to setting up colors, there are many different parameters you can target here. And you have to understand that this copy with method allows you to set up some base colors like accent color or primary color, which will then be used by multiple widgets that are built into Flutter. And you can also use these colors in your own widgets, as I will show you later. But besides setting some general colors like this, you can also set individual colors, like the scaffold background color, or you can set up entire sub-themes, you could say, like the elevated button theme, which requires a separate theme data object, which then allows you to set up some button-specific styles. And this can of course all be overwhelming, which is why we will set up these things step by step. But when it comes to setting up colors, there is a certain approach which I recommend using. And that is the usage of a color scheme. And that's what I meant before. The theming system in Flutter saw a lot of changes over the years. And color scheme is now not a new approach, but arguably the easiest approach of applying some colors to many widgets without having to manually set a bunch of colors individually. Instead, with color scheme, the idea is that you define one color scheme and Flutter then infers colors, different shades of colors to be precise, for different widgets. And for that, I'll first of all create such a color scheme, and I'll do that outside of this theme data constructor function to keep my code a bit more organized and structured. So here I'll create a new variable, and I'll name it K color scheme, and starting with K is just a convention you might want to use in Flutter, that you set up global variables with the starting character K. It's not something you have to do, but it is something you'll see quite a lot, especially for theme-related variables in other projects, so that's why I'll use it here as well. And the idea here simply is that this variable now contains a color scheme which we can use down there for setting up our theme. And a color scheme can be created by using Flutter's color scheme class. And whilst you could also create that from scratch, which again would require you to set a lot of colors manually, color scheme also gives you a from seed method or a from seed constructor function, which I recommend using because that is actually the constructor function that will then automatically create a color scheme with different shades of colors based on one base color, one seed color that you set up. And here I'll create a color manually with color from ARGB, and here I picked a color in advance where my alpha channel has a value of 255, red has 96, the green channel has 59, and blue has a value of 181. And this is a constant value, so we can add const here. And with that color scheme defined here, we can use that as a value down there in our theme. And if we do that, and again we enforce those changes, now you don't see a lot of changes here, but you see them if I, for example, open that modal. Here you see the buttons now have this purple color, and the background also has a light purple shade at least. Same is true for these cards here, which have a light purple background. And of course, we're also not done yet. Because now with that color scheme set up, you can fine-tune your theme. Besides setting up the color scheme when setting up the theme, you can now also override selected parts of the theme based on your color scheme though. For example, you can set up an app bar theme here and create an app bar theme object. Again, best done by creating an object and then using copy with, so that you get some default app bar theme settings by Flutter, and you then just override selected settings. And here you can then, for example, override the background color of the app bar and set this to a color from your color scheme. So reference your color scheme here, but now you get different properties on that scheme object that were inferred and set automatically by Flutter based on your seed color. For example, here I'll choose on primary container as a background color for my app bar. And I can only encourage you to try out different colors that were inferred here to see the difference. But I'll go for on primary container. And I'll also set a foreground color for my app bar theme and also set that based on my color scheme. And here I'll choose the primary container, so that I pick these two colors from my color scheme that is based on this seed color to fine-tune my app bar theme. And there are more things you could set on that app bar theme. For example, that the title should always be centered, or that there should be some drop shadow behind it. These are all things you can set, and again, definitely play around with these settings. But since we're using copy with, we don't have to set these settings. Instead, we're using the default settings and we're just overriding background color and foreground color. And here we can then actually also use const. And with that, if we now save this, you see that I have a totally different look for my app bar here, because of these selective overrides which I made in my theme object.